And the vegetable soup recipe that I use is out of this book. And it is just literally a mixture of vegetables that we like. There are some things in this list that I didn't want to put in there, so I added up the total number of cups of vegetables that were in there, and you'll see I have a note in there, 32 cups. So I do my own thing and I use 32 cups of mixed vegetables, and it's the ones that we like. And then I follow the rest of that recipe. So, okay, as I said, the beans need to be rehydrated, and to rehydrate the beans, follow your recipe book, but in this case, they need to be soaked overnight, or they can be boiled. It says they're boiled for 2 minutes, remove from heat, soak 1 hour, and then reheat to boiling, and drain them. And then this one doesn't have about the 30 minutes, but you really should do at least 30 minutes. And you will see different stuff. If you start looking on the internet, if you don't go to one of these sites that I gave you, you'll see people saying, oh, well, they don't do that. They just soak them, they put them in a jar and can them. Follow the actual instructions from the people who know what they're doing, because they're the ones that actually did the research, and they want to make sure you don't get sick. Okay? You can salt it if you want to. It's not necessary, and then you can taste it. And then you'll see the 2 tables in the middle of the page. I have, on this canner in particular, you saw the gauge that's on it. This is one of those that has a dial gauge, and it also has a weighted gauge, okay? And that's the way this one comes. A lot of the newer ones do come like that. If this is all you have, if all you have is the dial gauge, you can follow that if you've had it tested. And you need to find out from the extension. They have the ability to test them. These things can go bad, so you never want to rely on that from year to year. Now my mom has my grandmother's canner, and it's been around a long, long time, and her dial is right on the money. But she had it tested, okay, and she knows that. On this particular one, you use that kind of as a general guideline to see when you're getting up to pressure, but this is the actual workings of this canner. This is the weight, and it goes on this little petcock here. And there's 3 markings on here. It's 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and 15 pounds. Okay? This thing will never go bad. It's always going to be the right weight. So if you have one that has this weight on it, or some of the weights look a little different, but if it has a weight, you never have to have it tested. Okay? Because this is what you're going to go by. All right? Questions on any of that? Okay. So in the first thing here, I do have a dial gauge, but the one that I'm actually going to rely on is the weighted, so I'm going to use table 2. Okay? My style of pack is hot. Now what that means, for soups, it must be hot. There is no other choice. For some vegetables, like for instance my green beans, when I do green beans, I do not hot pack them. I cold pack them. But the book will tell you if you're allowed to use one or the other, you can make a choice. In this case, it must be hot, okay? So that's the style of pack. If I'm going to do green beans, I literally just stuff those green beans after they've been cleaned into the jars as tight as I can make them, fill it with the boiling water, because I still need to have that hot, and put the lids on and in the canner it goes, okay? The soups, I don't have that choice. And I'm doing quarts, so I'm going to, my process time then is going to be 75 minutes. That's once everything's in the canner, after the canner's been exhausted, and we'll talk about that over here. And then after it comes up to temperature and weight, that's when I'm going to start my timing. Okay? I didn't think about bringing a timer along. They have to have one of you guys with watches watch that for me. And then I know in this area I'm around 900 and some odd feet above sea level. So I am going to use the 10 pounds of pressure. Okay? You'll see in that list above 1,000 feet you need to use the 15 pounds. Okay?
Somebody has a smartphone, might have a timer.
Oh, that's true. Oh, yeah. You might have a timer. You don't have, yours is a dumb phone, but it might have a timer. Our phones just make and receive calls. We don't have any other phone stuff.
I've got one. How long
Oh,
you
yeah.
been, Denise?
Well, not yet, but once we start timing. So that means you can't leave.
I'm not.
Okay. So, and really this weight, all it is it's got the 5, 10, and 15 on here. And if, I'll pass it around, you can look at it. The hole is bored a little bit bigger for the different size weights. And what it actually does on the petcock, and you'll hear it once we get to that point, but it actually just rocks. And what that is doing is it's leaving out a little bit of steam to keep that pressure at a certain rate, okay? Whether 5, 10, or 15 pounds.
Do you adjust that?
No.
Or is that just kind of?
No, it's just a set calibration. If
And
you
it's
want
just-
10 pounds, you turn
just
it to
put
the
it
10 and set it on there.
Oh,
And
okay.
then-
So there is an adjustment in that you set it on.
There's 3 holes.
Right, there's 3 different
Okay,
holes.
gotcha.
It's 3
Yeah,
holes.
and you just turn it and set it on that way. So,
And then it's designed to hold that at 10 pounds or whatever.
so, and it makes a lot of racket, but you know, I'm so used to it anymore that I don't really even pay attention to it. On my stove, because I know how my stove works. Now I have to pay a lot more attention here because I don't know how this one's gonna work with it. So, my experience has been with my old canner, it was a lot harder to regulate the pressure on an electric stove than it is on my gas stove. So, I'll probably have to babysit it more here. So. Okay, so any questions on any of that? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start filling my jars. I've got everything pretty hot here. Ooh, I wish that was harder. Turn this up here. And this thing was boiling, but it is plenty hot. So we're not boiling quite anymore, but. Okay, and can you all see me okay? Yeah. There? Okay. Because you're welcome to come up here if you want to, but if you're comfortable there, you can stay there. Okay. A couple of tools I brought along with me. These are indispensable along with this. These tools I use for filling jars. This is the one that I use for taking the jars out of the canner. This you really can't live without. It is very, very hard to get those jars out of the canner if you don't have something like this, okay? Especially the water bath canner. These tools here, these are just helpers. But what this one does is it picks up that flat lid out of the hot water, because you have them in really hot water. So it'll just grab that lid for you. And then you can just go and set it on the jar. You need one of those. I canned for years without it, so, but they are nice.
It's magnetic.
Yes, it has a little magnet on the end. It's just a little plastic rod with a magnet. That's all it is. But I canned for years without it because my mom never had one. But I love that little thing. Okay, let's see. I guess I turned out the wrong one. No wonder they're not getting hot. I need someone to run interference for me here. And this little gadget, I just got this little gadget. This is the coolest thing. One thing that I did not talk about is headspace when you're filling your jars, because I will show you that when we get over here. But you can see how this jar it's not really full. You need a certain amount of headspace when you're filling your jars. So this little gizmo that I found on Amazon.com, my favorite place in the world, has calibrated measurements on it, okay? All the way down to 1/4 inch, which is what you use for your jellies and jams and things like that, all the way up to 1 inch, which is what you're going to use for your soup, okay? So what's neat about this, and headspace is really important, what's neat about this, since I'm going to do 1 inch, all I need to do is when I put my soup in my jar, I just take that and sit it on the edge. And this bottom piece should just come to the surface of that, whatever you're canning that day. Okay, it is a handy little tool. And then the other thing that you can use it for, and again, I just got this. I canned for years without this too. But I have a little 6-inch ruler in the kitchen, little wooden ruler that I used to use because I check every time I do my canning. I check the measurement just to make sure. But this is really handy. because you can literally just stick it in each jar as you go along. So it just speeds up the process. And I do a lot of canning, especially during the season. So that's a really little cool gizmo. The other thing you can use this for, you can turn it around, and soups you don't have to really worry about this because they're really liquid. But on like my green beans, when I'm canning the green beans, remember I said I packed them in there real tight? Because as vegetables heat up, they shrink. So you want them to be in there pretty tight so that when they're done, they're not just a bunch of vegetables floating up here in all this water, okay? So I pack them pretty tight. But then after I put my boiling water in, I need to get the air bubbles out, okay? Because remember what I said earlier about the air releasing from the jar is what pulls that lid down flat. See how that one, does that? Okay, that one's not sealed. You don't hear that on that one, okay? And you can look at the two of them when you come up here if you want to afterward. So you want to get any excess air bubbles out of there. So you take this end and run it down along the edge of the jar at a couple of places and just let those air bubbles release. Now you can do that. What I used to use for that is the plastic back end of a scraper, like a bowl scraper. You don't really want to use a knife because you don't really want to slide a knife down between your item and your jar. You can put microscopic little scratches in your jar and then compromise your jar, okay? So you don't really want to use something metal, but plastic, I use that end of a scraper for years. So, but anyway, it makes it faster and it makes it more foolproof. So, and it didn't, I think it was like $4, this little thing. This little thing runs $2 something, I think. So they're not expensive. The other thing is this makes filling the jars really handy. This is a wide mouth jar funnel, and it just sets on the jar, and it'll sit in all the jars, even that little narrow mouth jar. And it gives you a bigger target to hit when you're filling your jars, and it keeps the rim a lot cleaner. Okay, so that's the other little handy little thing. And then your jar lifter will pick your jars out of the canner really easily, because they are really hot when you get them out of there. Okay. You don't want to be touching them with your hands, or even, they're wet, remember, because they've been in that boiling water. So you don't want to use a pot holder because it gets wet and you're going to feel it. So you want something that you don't have to touch, okay? So those are some little handy gizmos when you're canning. And then the other things you already have in your kitchen, just a ladle, leave that right now. And then the other thing that I really like, this is called an Ove glove. And you can use the jar lifter to get them out of here, but I don't like messing with that when I'm filling my jars. So this glove is well insulated so I can actually pull them out. Now you don't want to get it wet because it will get hot if you get it wet. But like if I'm just going in here to pull a jar out, even though that jar's been boiling, you feel just a tad warm, not very much. And that's what I like to use for that. Now when I put water in here, you have to follow your instructions on the canner. When I'm pressure canning, I have probably about that much water in here, okay? Because the water, in a water bath canner, you want the water to cover your jars. In a pressure canner, what's doing the actual cooking, I guess you'd say, is the pressure. So you don't need a lot of water. And then I do have one of those racks underneath my jars, because you don't want your jars sitting right on the bottom of your pan, okay? And again, they came with those 2 racks, so. Okay, when I'm filling for soup, and I think the instructions tell you this, yes, fill jars halfway with solid mixture, and then the rest of the way with your liquids, okay? And remembering to leave your 1-inch headspace, all right? So what I like to use for that, in this case, of course, my liquid is my soup base, but I just use something out of my kitchen cabinet. And I'm just going to fill it with liquid, or the solid portion. And canning is kind of a messy sport. So, but I mean, it's just, pretty much anything I do in the kitchen is pretty messy, it seems like. I don't normally wear decent clothing for doing this, because, if you get it on you or whatever, and that's a little bit more than I really wanted. Well, yeah, that should be good. So we're about halfway with that, okay? With your solids, and then you want to go back and fill with your liquid. Wait, it smells good.
It just does.
I love
If I had
soups.
something to eat, or I'd be over here munching.
Ah. Okay. Okay, then I'm going to use my handy little gizmo. And I could use just a little more.
So you don't wanna have it more than 1 inch.
Right. You just want
Either.
You just want 1 inch. Right.
Exactly.
Then the other thing you want to do, now remember I said that those flat lids, they have that sealing compound around on there, and they've been heating up, so they're kind of soft. You don't want anything between your lid, your rim of your jar, and your sealing compound, okay? So you want to take a damp rag, clean rag, not a dishcloth that's been sitting in your kitchen for a while, okay? You want a clean one. Because remember, you're trying to keep any spores or anything. Now it's going to go through the canner. In this case, it's, you know, it wouldn't live, but you do want to use a clean one. And just wipe off the rim of that jar, okay? See why you need one of these? That goes on there, and just kind of center that on the jar. And then you take your ring. And when you tighten these, give it a twist, and then I back it off just a little bit. Okay, you don't want it too tight, because it has to get rid of the air that's in there in order to properly seal. And into the canner it goes. And when you're doing this, it would really be great to have like 4 hands.
You want some help?
Oh no, you don't dare get in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Underfoot. If anyone would like to try to fill some, you're welcome. I mean, you guys are welcome to come up and actually fill some, so you can kind of see, you know, closer what I'm doing. Don't be bashful, because I'm not.
We'd rather watch you do it.
But you can gladly do that. And you don't have to worry about making a mess, because I make a mess all the time when I'm doing this. So.
What do you do if you get to the end, you don't have enough broth?
You can do one of 2 things. You can either put that jar in the fridge and eat it in the next day or 2 and not can it, or you could add additional water. If I have something like, for instance, the green beans, you know, I generally have plenty of water heating up. In this instance, I would probably opt to put it in the fridge and just eat it within the next day or 2, only because I don't want to water down my broth.
Or you could use canned broth.
Yes, you could use canned. You would run, theoretically you'd want to have it hot, you know, because you don't want to put that cold stuff in there. So if you think there's a chance that you might need more, you may just want to heat some, you know, in a separate pan on the stove. Because yes, you can do that. I've never used this recipe, by the way, so. But it sounded good because we've had other white bean chili and liked it. So when I found the canning recipe, it was like, sounds like a good one to do. Now the reason I have the water in the jars is because when you get them in there and they're sitting in that water, they tend to want to float. And if you put the water in them, it makes it a little easier. They don't float around in there when you take the jars out. You don't have to do that. You can just have them in there just like, or some people run them in the dishwasher and then get them hot out of the dishwasher and use it like that. So it's It's whatever works for you. Since I've got to heat the canner anyway, I just throw the jars in there. Soups are a good way to use up bits and pieces if you have like bits and pieces hanging out. In fact, that was one of the reasons that I tried the vegetable soup. I had some frozen vegetables that I really needed to use up before the next season started. And so I found that soup recipe, and vegetable soup is something that I love. So, and it actually turned out really good.
Have you ever canned any meats?
Yes, I've done chicken. I don't think I've done any beef yet, but I have done several things of chicken. And the chicken turns out really good.
And do you cook it
I do, yes.
first?
You can either do raw pack with chicken. I'm not sure about beef. I think you'd want to cook the beef, but with the chicken you can do raw pack or cooked. And from the people who've done both, I've heard them say that they prefer the cooked for the texture. Now I think that's probably subjective. I think everybody has their own, you know, whatever they like.
I don't know if we have anybody in here with fish, but one gal that I know does a lot of canning used to can fish, and she said they tasted a lot like salmon that way.
Yeah, that would be really good actually. Anybody want to try it?
I'll try it.
Usually I ball it a little short. So you can see where it'd be really handy to have 4 hands.
Well, you got 'em now.
I smell the cumin.
Yeah. So my
One thing that I like with cumin too is if you get the cumin in the seeds, you know, the whole cumin, and use a mortar and pestle, oh, that cumin smells so good.
We'll get you a jar here. Yeah, my glove did get a little wet, but it's kind of warmed up a little bit. You want to use the glove?
And I'm okay.
They're okay?
I have to get it scooted
It's a
over
little
here.
bit wet on the one finger, but
One thing I always try to do is get it as close to the
Yeah.
thing.
you make kind of less of a mess then.
Even though a mess is inevitable when you're canning.
Yeah. When I do peaches, I usually have sticky stuff everywhere. Yep, I think you're good with that. Let your ladle drip off a little bit. You won't have so much dripping off of it. I make that mistake sometimes too.
Let's see how we're doing here.
Makes it handy, doesn't it?
Where did you get your, oh, I put way too much down, I know I did.
Yep.
Where did you get your stainless steel, is that what this was for?
Yeah, you can use it for that. I got that Ace Hardware, I believe.
Cause I have a plastic one.
Yeah, I had a plastic one too, but this one's nicer.
Yeah, I like the
It's
stainless
got
steel
It's got a
better.
bigger bowl.
Maybe just a
Yeah,
hair.
I'd take a little bit more out of it, but I'd rather have it a little shy than over. That's probably good. There, you're good. And when you're doing meats or soups like this that have meat in them, the important part about the top of the jar is that meats have a little bit of fat in them. Even though when I did my broth, I skimmed all the fat off of it after it got cooled, because the fat it can climb the sides of the jar and get under your lid and not give you a good seal. Okay, so you want to make sure that you've got all that fat off of there. Anybody else want to try it?
Next.
No? All right,
No takers?
you'll make me do it.
After you've done one or two, you get a better idea what that inch is.
Yeah, you
First
do.
time it's-
You can kind of sort of eyeball it, but you know, I've done a lot of canning in the last couple of years, and that little tool really makes it handy because there's no guessing.
So how many years does the soup last once it's candied?
Well, I think that in some of the canning books, they'll give you kind of a time frame. That vegetable soup there, I canned a bunch of it, and that one is actually from 2010. And the potatoes that are in there might be a little bit softer than they originally were, and some of the other vegetables might. But, I mean, you'll have quality will suffer a little bit the older it gets. But, you know, because it's in the jar and all together, even the nutrients that may have gone out of the vegetables, it's still in the broth, you know, so you're still going to get them. Ideally, you want to use it up within a year, 2 years' time, and so.
If you have something like blackberries or something, would that last like 5 years?
You know, they probably would. I have never canned berries. Berries is one of those things that I always freeze. They probably would. I think they probably get really soft. And the thing that you would want to watch is like even in my, I said a couple girls got here earlier, I had a coat closet that I turned into a canning closet and I put shelving in it and I got all my canned goods in there. Every now and then I'll go in there and just run my fingers over the lids and make sure none of those lids have popped. Because as I said, I don't have the rings on them in there. I take the rings off when they're in there. So, you know, I'll just go and check them. If they're still sealed, they're still good. They're still edible. You just may have, you know, they may soften some. Quality basically will suffer a little bit the older it gets. This is going to work out just good. Stock pots are indispensable when you're doing stuff like this. This is the biggest one I have, and I really like a bigger one. Because sometimes this one's
I
not
have
going to
one
work.
that's a little bigger than that, and I actually use it for hot water.
Really?
And,
Yeah, you can do that.
and another thing, the dome lid,
Uh-huh.
you know, she was saying that you have a lot of those, and over time, they will start to get rusty. What I did, and actually Denise was the one that suggested it to me, was I took a bunch of those dome lids and I put them together with those little plastic zip strips. And that's what I use in the bottom of my large stock pot for hot water canning, so that the jars aren't right down on the bottom.
So where do you get these stop pots?
Bought ours on eBay, but
Well, that's
it
not
comes
a
from
couple
Wisconsin.
We used to have a large kitchen supply store, and you can get them there. You might be able to get, I've never really looked at Walmart, they might have them. But also a kitchen supply, you know, like the ones that are down in the,
We do have, ours, actually, we have Food Equipment Brokers, FEB it's called, over in Branson Meadows Mall. They're only open weekdays, because it's an actual restaurant supply, but it is open to the public. Favorite place of mine.
yeah, restaurant supply is the best place to get a large stock pot.
Okay, so all of it, does anybody want to come up and look
Yeah,
in here? We got all the jars in here. Turn the rest of this off. You can see how much water I have in there, and that is going to be dependent on the canner that you buy. Okay, you want to follow your instructions for the canner that you buy. Okay. So we got them all full, and they're all in there. I did pretty good, huh?
Excellent.
we had 16 pints, was there 16 pints in that can?
I think so, yeah. I think we did. I think we did.
Well, that's a lot. Denise came and helped me can these.
Okay. Now, as I said, this canner does not have a gasket in it. Most of your canners that you find do. What I liked about this one is it didn't have a gasket, because there's nothing that's going to wear out on it. This canner will outlive me many lifetimes.
Yeah, it's a taper fit, is what it is.
Right, and it's just metal on metal. But the important thing when you're putting the lid on this one is to make sure that it's level all the way around. And then you want to, see all these little ears that are around on here? You want to turn opposite ears down at the same time to try and keep that level. It looks like something from outer space, but it really works good. I mean, I was reluctant to get rid of my old one, which I still have, but I am going to sell. And then I used this one the first time and said, oh yeah, it's out of here. I just love it.